In the fall of 2006, patients began flooding into a hospital in Panama City with a mysterious illness. The doctors knew they had a crisis on their hands, but struggled to find the cause.
In the first 24 hours, there is a sense that this could very well be an infectious disease of epidemic proportions, and that this could spread to the rest of the population. And it was quite frightening to think that this was going on and that we didn't know what it was.
Panama Canal employee Carlos Umanzor, a father of 7, began to develop severe symptoms.
Comenzó con fiebre, escalofrío, fiebre.
He had a high fever, and he couldn't stop vomiting.
And the relatives were worried because their loved ones were very ill, but they had been living with them in their houses. So who was going to be next? My child, the wife, the mother. So it was uncertainty and fear.
Patients began to die in alarming numbers. Doctors worked frantically around the clock to find the source of the sickness. It was Carlos Umanzor's case that provided the clues to solve the mystery. He'd come in with a heart attack, but developed the same symptoms as the people who were dying.
His kidneys started to fail, then his lungs, his nervous system, and finally he fell into a coma.
The doctors knew it must be something they were giving him. They'd tested every drug Carlos had been given except a cough syrup. A test revealed it was poison, but it was too late. Carlos and over 21 others had already died.
Then it was like somebody had thrown cold water over me. How are we going to explain this? How are we going to explain to the people that we, the persons that are supposed to be giving health, we have poisoned the people that we're supposed to be caring for?
Thousands of bottles of this poisonous cough medicine had been unwittingly distributed to the poor and elderly all over Panama via their social security system.
We needed to get back more than 100,000 bottles because that was death that was out there.
A massive recall campaign was launched. Warnings were put out on the radio and television. Neighborhoods were searched, door to door. At the same time, the coroner began exhuming bodies and performing autopsies on those who had died suspicious deaths. The death toll climbed towards 100. How did such a calamity happen, and who is to blame for this tragedy? This poisonous pipeline stretched halfway across the world to rural China. The toxic ingredient was made by a company called Taixing Glycerin. Taixing appears to be a professional operation with an internet site featuring their headquarters building. But the reality is different. These buildings are the real Taixing. It turns out the high-rise belongs to an unrelated company located more than 100 miles away. Taixing officials simply put the photo on their site to lend credibility to their enterprise.
Taixing Glycerin Factory decided that they could make money by taking a cheap ingredient, which unfortunately happened to be poison, called diethylene glycol, which is an industrial solvent used in antifreeze, and to substitute that for its more expensive chemical cousin, which is glycerin, an ingredient that's safe and commonly used in medicine and food.
The factory was not certified to sell any medical-grade glycerin. The poison was shipped out of China to a company in Barcelona called Rasfair, who apparently did not test the contents. The drums were bought by a broker in Panama called Medicom. They sold the lethal cargo to the Social Security system, who made it into cough syrup. Angel de la Ruz, a Medicom executive, was arrested in the midst of a public outcry about the mass poisoning, but claims he acted in good faith. China's regulators initially said they had no legal grounds to take action against Taixing, but they recently shut down the plant 10 months after the deaths in Panama. The owner was never prosecuted.
They're criminals. They're criminals, and they may not be pulling a trigger, but they're essentially killing people in another way.
The Chinese government has promised sweeping changes in food and drugs regulation. And in 2007, on the heels of several fatal drug poisonings here, the head of China's Food and Drug Administration was convicted of accepting nearly $1 million in bribes. He was executed.